One more time, a very warm welcome to the ID Talks Gender that is brought to you by Salto Inclusion and Diversity. We are gathering every second Wednesday to talk about topics that matter much for inclusion, diversity, and also for youth work across Europe and beyond. Today, the topic that we are going to discover together with Tony Lashden is gender, and gender as a multi-layer social construct. We are very privileged, very lucky to have with us Tony. They are a Belarusian queer feminist activist working with the topic of intersecting discriminations, holistic well-being, and capacity strengthening of young feminists in Ukraine and beyond. Tony is a co-founder of a grassroots feminist initiative called Tender Not Gender, that is based in Minsk, and many more things I could tell about Tony, but they will take the floor now and tell you much more about them. So very warm welcome to you, Tony, and to all our audience. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a great privilege and pleasure to be here. I will start my PowerPoint and then I will share a little bit more about what is going to happen today. So, as Anna said, we're going to discover the topic of gender today, but as gender is a super complex I think theme that could be discussed, I don't know, for many, many hours. Today, we will try to highlight some of the issues that are connected both to gender, but also to body. And mostly today, I will focus on how our bodies, our physical being mostly is connected to gender, and how could we make our youth work more inclusive to the gender variety around us. So just to, give you a brief understanding of the context where I come from. So as Anna mentioned, I'm a co-founder of a queer feminist initiative, Tender Not Gender. And this is mostly the initiative where I gain a lot of experience when it comes to young feminist grassroots organization of different events for youth, but also for people beyond the age of youth. Still in Minsk, we are hosting and organizing a lot of gatherings for young people. And this is where my expertise on more or less hosting events for youth is coming from. Together with that, I am a human rights defender. I have been working with women's rights and LGBTQ rights for almost 6 years now internationally. I have hosted, I counted yesterday, almost 200 events for international organizing and for international human rights defenders. So I have a lot of expertise when it comes to international communities, international fora of organizing, and international specificity of having a lot of different people with a lot of different backgrounds in the room. The last but not the least, I'm also a journalist and a writer. I do quite a substantial amount of writing in Russian and English on the topics of sexuality, gender, gender variety, gender nonconformity, and inclusivity. So I have both the theoretical layer of how gender is connected to youth work, but also I have many, many years of experience of how it is actually on the ground, how people react, and how could we engage with the youth in a more sustainable, inclusive, and meaningful way. And that is my background. But just to give you a more deeper insight in how I ended up being in this position, I wanted to share a little bit of my story of how I came into feminist organizing and into feminist activism. So for you to understand that this hasn't been, purely a theoretical path for me, but more or less has been the way to discover my own self, to find a more sustainable way for myself to be and to live in such, I think, a deeply patriarchal country as Belarus. So when I was a youngster, when I was 14, 16 years old, I actually struggled a lot with my mental health. I had chronic depression, even by that period of time, and I had a substantial amount of difficulties with my body image in the high school. So when I entered to the high school, I had a lot of difficulties in participation in art or sport activities due to what is called dysphoria. That is a discomfort with one's own body, and dysmorphic disorder. That is a distorted self-perception. It might look that it's not much to have a distorted self-perception, but it really in most occasions prohibited me from participating in things I actually enjoyed, such as, for example, theatre, because I was extremely anxious about how other people would perceive me, whether they would mock my body or the way I look, whether I would feel myself comfortable enough to participate in sport, for example. And in most occasions, I didn't took my place in any of those activities. So I tried to stay in the shadows as I was extremely insecure about how I looked like. It was very difficult for me to get engaged in most of youth organizing because I didn't feel comfortable or safe enough to do so. In the end of the day, after many years of engagement in body positive and body neutrality movements, feminism and therapy, I felt much more confident in myself and safer. And then I gradually started to try new things. I started to perform in theatre. I moved to less toxic communities. And then in the end of the day, I started my own initiative to provide such space to other young feminists and to other young people who have same difficulties and who face same issues. I'm sure that my story is not unique, and I would like to kindly ask you, like, if you recognize any of these, if you have experience in something like that in your high school or in your young age, or if you are struggling with any of these issues right now, could you maybe please post a plus in the chat, or I don't know, raise your hand if that is something you recognize. Yeah, I see some pluses. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'm sure that that is not unique, and that is an experience, unfortunately, many of us who do not conform to some of the standards and stereotypes on physical appearances, on gender, on physical habits. That is unfortunately the reality in which we live, where this problem is almost universal. For you to get sort of a grasp on how widely spread this is, I wanted to share that at the moment, according to recent statistics, 9% of population worldwide are affected by eating disorders and issues related to their bodies. It might not look as much as it could, so 9% is not, you know, not that astounding amount of people who suffer from that. I think it is still substantial if you look worldwide. And if we look closer to the groups with which we work, the issue became bigger. As an example, recently, UK Mental Health Foundation found out that more than 30% of teenagers feel upset and ashamed in relation to their body. And even more people, almost half of teenagers, so people between the age of 12 and 18, they have been practicing some sort of dieting or some sort of practices related to alteration of their body to feel safer and to feel more comfortable. The issue related to body image looks very different for different groups. So when it comes to youth work, we should recognize that youth, specifically young women, LGBTQ+ and BIPOC youth, are at higher risk to experience body image related issues and eating disorders. Gender non-conforming people, including trans and non-binary youth, they go through more severe consequences related to their dissatisfaction with the bodies. As an example, gender non-conforming people, including trans and non-binary people, are at higher risk of suicide in relation to their dissatisfaction with the body. Body image typically develop into more severe mental conditions if the person doesn't receive any support or treatment. And unfortunately, in our context, I come from Eastern Europe. As an example, typically body image related issues are not recognized as issues as such. So if a person, for example, starts dieting, typically that is praised as something that is good for the person. If the person starts excessive exercising, that is seen as a healthy behavior, and that is also encouraged and supported. In the end of the day, people who suffer from, I think, difficult mental conditions, they receive social support to things that actually are extremely damaging to them, their perception and their health. And eventually that grows into more severe conditions that likely requires not only psychological and therapeutical help, but also like medical support to what is happening with the individual. I think one number that I was very upset to think about is that according to the Swedish Society Against Eating Disorders, the most recent statistics, out of all patients who come to the hospital with eating disorders issues, 94% of them are cis women. And then I think another number, which is good to have in your mind, is the following, that 60% of young men under 18, they report muscularity-oriented dieting that impact their relations with their bodies. So it might look that, as an example, cis women are more affected by eating disorders or by issues related to body. However, that is what I would say is a more usual and recognized issue related to body, that people are dieting. However, if we look at different subpopulations, such as, for example, young cis men, we could see that the issue with the body is still there. It's just it has another angle to it. It's not that boys do not diet, it's just they diet in a different way. And this is still same very damaging behavior and very damaging habit that is connected to bodily standards in our society. It just has another type of projection into the outer world. Then when it comes to non-binary and trans people, almost half of them instantly report just mental bad and physical health. Half of people who identify as non-binary and trans, they just feel bad all of the time. And with that, I wanted to kind of highlight that our relations with our body and the way we feel ourselves in it, they have a tremendous impact on our quality of life, our satisfaction with life, and our opportunities in life to engage in activities we would like to be in, our opportunity to be present and be out loud in the spaces and forests where we want to be. And now, why does it happen, and how all of that is connected to gender? At least my assessment is that gender as a system has a very narrow and rigid standard for appearances and bodies. And then, while those standards are extremely rigid, they are supported by social institutes such as family and schools. And while those institutes, they support them, they also reproduce those type of norms. And I wanted to, instantly have a question to you here. How do you think, what type of body-related norms are there, for example, for men and women? Have you ever heard someone saying that a woman is supposed to be, light as a feather, and then a man is supposed to be strong and muscular? Maybe could you share a couple of those if you have heard any of those during your lifetime in the chat? Yep, six pack. Anything else? Yep, thin yet curvy women. Long hair. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so when you have to look after yourself, any norms related to masculinity or to how cis men are supposed to look like? Yep, they're supposed to be strong and tall, not feminine. Exactly. Short hair, no makeup, broad shoulders. Yeah, so they're supposed to be strong. And I think, like, if we look at the number of 60% of boys who are dieting to gain muscles, that is something that that shows us that this is a norm that is recognized by many people who identify themselves as men. Yeah, boys don't have to care for their skin, etc. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think if we dig even deeper, then we will uncover that gendered stereotypes in relation to the body, in a nutshell, they could be divided into two groups. Men are valued according to their strengths and muscles. So then men are supposed to go to gym, they're supposed to have a six-pack, they're supposed to be strong and tall, they're supposed to have, I don't know, a lot of muscles. When it comes to women's value, women are supposed to be thin, they're supposed to have sexual appeal, they're supposed to look after themselves. And then it might not be an issue if those stereotypes were somewhere there in the outer space for us to, just to look at them and say, well, it doesn't really matter that much to me. Unfortunately, in the gendered system, our own value is then evaluated in relation to our conformity to those stereotypes. So if a man does not conform to the stereotype of being strong and muscled, then instantly he is not recognized as manly enough. Same goes to the women. Women receive a lot of comments on their appearances if they don't conform to gendered standards of how they're supposed to look like. In the end of the day, these conflicting and unrealistic gendered standards, they create an extremely toxic environment for people to grow up in, especially when it comes to youth. On the one hand, woman is supposed to be thin, and the thinner you are, the better it is. On the other hand, you're supposed to be healthy, and then you're supposed to be able to bear children, and then fertility and sexuality and sexual appeal to others are also important. On the one hand, you are supposed to be extremely beautiful and, you should look after yourself. On the other hand, you're supposed to also take care of your household and invest a lot of your time and efforts to have, for example, a job, to be independent enough to pay for yourself. These conflicting standards, they create a very blurred picture for people to actually find their own space in the society, because whenever they do not conform with the standards that are there, they're instantly socially punished for that. As an example, when I was in the school and I used to wear really long hair and a lot of bright makeup, I was constantly commented on, on that being inappropriate, that I should alterate my looks, and there are other standards of how young women are supposed to look like. Then I think the other cause of discourse that is happening is that there is a lot of media pressure, including online pressure, and I will talk about that in a little bit, on looks, physical ability, and body performance. Most of our life, we are surrounded by Photoshop pictures of how people look, what type of clothes they wear, and how they look both in their private environments and in public spaces. Those type of representations are also not realistic. It's only in the recent years when models, actors, and people in the public spaces started to comment on the fact that, almost all of their pictures are Photoshopped. There is a lot of efforts done for them to look the way they look, and yet still those type of standards are projected to the rest of the society. So I would say each woman is supposed to look like as if she has, 5 hairdressers, 1 makeup artist and 1 stylist. And then no one really talks that it takes a lot of money, a lot of efforts, and a lot of time to look like people on the magazines. Then I think another thing that is happening is a lot of peer pressure, bullying, and rigid school system related to body variety. I don't know how that is in your context, and please share if you would like to. In my school, we used to have a uniform, and then it was, and that was not, a comfortable uniform for everyone. The uniform was divided into masculine and feminine. You couldn't choose which type of uniform you would like to wear. Then the school could punish you for not being, for not being properly clothed. And I think now it's getting a little bit better for young people. However, there is still a very rigid understanding of how people can look like, what type of haircuts they could have in school, whether they are allowed or not allowed to wear makeup, what type of clothes is appropriate or not in schools. All of that really influence on how people, on whether people feel safe or not, and what really happens to their self-esteem later in life. And then I think the last part I wanted to bring up to your attention, and maybe to the later discussion, is the toxic comment culture. I don't know whether that is something that is happening in your context as well. In Eastern Europe, I think that is a major way to communicate about appearances of other people. When I say toxic comment culture, I mean those, small questions or small comments on your appearance that highlight that you are, I don't know, clothed inadequate, or you look inadequate. As an example, someone could easily come to you and say like, well, have you considered losing weight? Or, well, I don't really think this haircut looks nice on you. And that wouldn't be something that you ask for. It's not that you ask for any advice or any questions or any comments on how you look like. People just would feel comfortable to come to you and share those type of comments. And I think that is especially harmful when it comes from family environment. I think when it comes to, at least in my family, it was okay when I was a teenager to just comment on everything, on your haircut, on your clothes, on your nails, on your face, on everything. And that was fine. So and that was portrayed as fine. However, in the end of the day, that really affects your self-esteem, and that takes away your security in how you look like, that takes away security in your body, and that takes away, some sort of feeling of a safer space when it comes to how you look like and how do you want to look like. When it comes to media, I also wanted to share that, as I said, I think it's only a couple of years when people on social media started to comment or to share that mostly what we see there is fake. It really depends on the posture, on the Photoshop, on the amount of makeup, how people look like, and how are they portrayed. I think that online media platforms, especially Instagram, and really popularized the discourse of showing how you look like, what are you eating, what do you wear online, and then instantly receiving gratification on that. That plays an important role in how we perceive ourselves and how we want to be portrayed. When I started my youth work in 2015, I have experienced, a huge difficulty in taking group pictures, especially with young women. Because then when we would, for example, gather all together, and then I would try to take like a joint selfie, a lot of people, if they know that that is something that would be posted online, they would need to check how they look like in the picture, so they would look nice and they wouldn't feel threatened or insecure that that is, something that is going to be posted online. That is still something I think that is happening. And I think, unfortunately, it will continue to happen, especially taking into account that a lot of filters are getting more and more enhanced. If you have any experience with TikTok, or what type of filters are there in the TikTok, I think it's also one thing when pictures are photoshopped or alterated. It's a completely other thing when there are filters that could alter, a whole video with you in it. They could alter the whole body. And then, the reality of how you look like and how you're portrayed online, those are two different things. In the end of the day, I think that just deteriorates the mental health of youngsters, but also like for all people. Because then whenever you see yourself in the mirror, you are dissatisfied with how you look like. Because, you could go online, you could apply a filter, and then you would conform with this beauty standard that is there. And my personal belief that as people working with youth, we have a responsibility to break harmful social norms when it comes to body. And it's our responsibility to highlight all of those issues to the people with whom we work. Because I think that though there is a discussion on what is portrayed online, that, you know, there are a lot of gender stereotypes in relation to body. Whenever I go to a group of, I don't know, 16, 18 years old, there is a constant, though they are aware that that is, you know, an issue, there is still an intention within the group to at least to conform to at least of some of those standards. And I don't think that that is, you know, a bad thing. Young people want to feel a part of the group. They want to feel included, and they want to feel as they're, you know, a part of a larger community or a larger society. And to do so, they need to conform to some standards or to some norms. I think it is our responsibility to discuss that some of those norms can be extremely harmful and damaging to them, and to, you know, be vocal about that, because it's not that many spaces, or it's not that many people who actually talk about those issues. In the last bit, I wanted to share some of the practices that come from my own experience and my own from my own experience of work, and discuss some of the practices we do, for example, in our initiative to help our beneficiaries and to help people who come to our events to feel safer. And those are, you know, a set of very different practices. I will try to unpack some of those so you would have, you know, a context of how we apply them. I don't really think that, you know, it is realistic for everyone to apply all of those practices. I just want to set some sort of context where we could discuss how all of these could work for you, or maybe not, and whether there is something, you know, worthwhile exploring. So when it comes to gender-related norms, my first advice, and something we do by ourselves in the initiative, we always start with ourselves. So what we try to do is to reflect upon our own internalized norms on body, appearance, and functionality. To do so, we had one day of open discussions on, you know, what type of norms we think they are in the society, and then we try to, you know, be as honest as possible with within ourselves, whether we try to comply with any of those norms, whether, you know, there is any social punishment for when we cross those norms, or whether, you know, those norms are harmful or not. When you set that type of background for you and your colleagues, it is easier then to tackle a lot of other topics. Because, you know, as an example, I wear makeup, but a lot of my colleagues within the feminist movement, they do not. And to have a productive discussion whether makeup is damaging or not, we really need to reflect upon, you know, our own internalized norms, whether I think it's okay for me to come to public spaces without the makeup, and I think that's totally fine. And if I don't feel the pressure to wear makeup all of the time, then it might be, you know, a pathway for me for self-expression, or it might be a path for me to actually feel more comfortable with my own body. And then when you unpack all of those reasoning, and when other people hear like how you think about those type of norms, it's easier for them to engage in the dialogue with you. So I think this part is especially important for your team and yourselves to kind of just have an honest talk about all of that. When it comes to actual work with people, I think it's extremely important to encourage self-expression and create safer spaces by verbally acknowledging mutual agreements. What do I mean by that? As an example, I used to work with LGBTQ and queer teenagers, and typically when they would come for the first day in a workshop or in a training where we would work with them, all of them would look extremely normative, typically, like, you know, no bright clothes, like regular appearances, no one would wear makeup, so people would just look normal. However, if we would then, as trainers, say that this is a safer space to try out new things, and we want to agree with the group that there will be no comments on appearances, and we would use, if we want to encourage someone, different type of compliments. As an example, instead of saying like, well, you look nice, you would comment on a specific item of cloth, as an example, that looks nice. You would say like, well, what a nice t-shirt you have. Or what, I don't know, nice eyeliner you have. Or yeah, so instead of focusing on the body and commenting the look or the body, we would comment specific items. And that, almost on the second day of the training, would instantly result in people having all of this wonderful makeups, glitter on them. I had several participants who decided to exchange clothes to try out a little bit, different styles. So I think whenever you, as a trainer or as a youth worker, you set the context that this is fine to try out new things, this is fine to be who you are, and then you set a rule that we will try not to negatively comment on that, then people start to experience a very different opportunity for them to express themselves. And then it's, the most important part of that is to intervene in conversations on looks. So not just to say, well, we will try to celebrate each other, and then you hear, when a person says, well, I don't really think that haircut looks nice on you. It is your responsibility to intervene in that and remind that we have a rule not to comment on that. And you have to be that authority figure in the group to remind those were mutual agreements, that, as a group, we agreed on that, and this is how we should proceed. It might seem that this is something that relates to mostly young women. It is extremely important for young men as well. Most of them, from my experience, live in extremely rigid standards of how men could express themselves, how they could look like, and what type of accessories, makeup, I don't know, nail polish they could wear. Typically, they cannot wear that. So when you say that it's fine to try out new things, you set this completely new space for people to really try new things. Second, when it comes to gender, it is extremely important to intervene into sexualizing conversations. What I mean by that, I have been in several environments where, the group would be a mixed group, and mostly it will consist of cis men and cis women. And typically there would be some comments on, I don't know, how sexy or how hot someone looks like. It might not be, directed to people in the group. So it wouldn't be like one young man comments on other young women, like, oh, well, you look so hot. It might be, just general comments on pictures on social media, or discussions related to, I don't know, how hot Megan Fox is, or something like that. In my work, I recognize it as important to intervene into those, because such conversations, according to my assessment and according to the feedback of participants, they make young women unsafe, and they feel more pressure to look a certain way and to behave a certain way when such comments are made in the group, even if they're not directed on themselves or on them. And the last bit here is to recognize that in different cultures, people express themselves differently. As an example, for many, many years, I lived in Sweden. And in Sweden, it's absolutely fine for cis women not to wear any type of makeup to any public activities. So when, for example, a Swedish woman, she puts up makeup, that is like an extremely special occasion. And typically, they do not wear makeup at all. Then when it comes, I'm sure you could recognize that, to Eastern Europe, then it is expected for you to wear makeup all of the time, especially when you go to public places. And it is perceived as a disgrace if you appear on an important meeting and you don't wear, I don't know, any makeup. So then first for you and for me, it was important to recognize that being comfortable means different things for different people. So if I have a participant from Eastern Europe who wakes up at 7 o'clock to, put up a full coverage makeup, it might be the most comfortable way for her to be in this space. It still might be my responsibility to try to have a discussion that it's fine, for example, for a day, not to wear that. And again, go into encouraging self-expression, saying that it's fine to try out new things. If you don't want to, or if you want to try out, to be without the makeup, you can do that. But I cannot force people to do things. Like if the person is coming from a specific context, feel that that is the safest way for them to be in this group, we should recognize and accept that this is the way for them to be, and try to highlight that to other people in the group. Because sometimes, like I would receive comments from my Swedish colleagues like, oh, well, do you have any special occasion today that you wear makeup? And I would say, well, no, it's just a way for me to self-express. But I'm a grown person. When you're a teenager, of course, this also could be recognized as a toxic comment, that you're inadequate. For example, that we're in this group, do not wear makeup and you wear, so you are not a part of the group. So for you as a youth worker, it's just important to bring groups' attention to the fact that people are different. They come from different.
Tony, you were muted, I think.
Really? When did you lost me?
Just for a
People
second.
are different. Was the sentence.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Yeah, so I thought it would. Yeah, it's just important for you to bring the attention of the group that people are very different, and they could come from completely different communities where there are a lot of different cultural and social expectations. And sometimes people feel safe enough with you to break those social expectations. Sometimes they're not, and it's fine for them just to be as they are. That is what comes to gender. I have a couple of more things to discuss. I wanted to bring some practices that are related to food. In my work, especially with queer youth, and from people coming from contexts where they have experiences of poverty, I felt that food, though it could be recognized just as a meaning to sustain yourself, it has a lot of cultural and social value. I found it important, for example, to never assume that I know what other people eat, how much they eat, how much they need to feel that they have eaten, what is healthy for them. And I think it's important not to try to control what is happening in the relations with the food. As an example, sometimes people have specific relations with the food when they eat small portions of the food during the day. And I have been in several conversations when someone would look at the plate of another person and would say, well, this is so little, like, is this all you're going to eat for the day? While this one comment is not that harmful, when it is a continued course of questioning and asking and intervening into other person's space, and because that becomes harmful. And typically that is what is happening. So one person would comment, then another person would comment, then someone else would pay attention to what the person eats or not eats. And then in the end of the day, the person feels the pressure to try to defend what is happening with them. And that just I think that is extremely damaging to people and to how they whether they feel safe or not. I also really encourage people to refrain from the term healthy eating. If you would dive a little bit deeper into the topic of eating disorders, what is called healthy eating, or eating specific type of products, or eating a specific type of food that is considered healthy, that is called orthorexia, so selective eating, and that is also a type of eating disorder. So sometimes people who, you know, who are perceived that they are healthy and they eat healthy things, they could also experience a lot of mental issues and a lot of mental loads in relation to their attitude towards the food and what they could eat and not eat. Another thing, and that is what we practice in the initiative all the time, we have different food available all the time for people. What I mean by that, typically we have some snacks such as fruits, water, I don't know, cookies, all of the time in the room. It could be just a small table with some food there, but people, whenever they feel hungry, they could go and eat. One thing why we do that is that because sometimes for people, and that is another thing I have listed here, it is very difficult for them to eat together with other people. They feel ashamed and they feel very shy to do so. So then sometimes they, for example, first they need a possibility to eat alone. That is one thing. And secondly, they really need some food to be there to eat whenever they feel hungry. Then it's important to have water there because that's just essential, I think. And then when it comes to what you could do, I also think it's important not to support or encourage dieting talks in your community. That is the thing I dread the most. Whenever you go into the room, and then typically there would be a discussion that, well, today I only ate a salad and I feel so bad that I ate so much. And then it's you with your plate of pasta sitting at the same table. And this creates a very disempowering type of environment where people would feel ashamed to eat. So I think for you as a youth worker, and for me, I do that all the time, it's important to say that let's try not to talk about that, or let's try to have a conversation on another topic. Typically when people feel that this is not encouraged, they do not talk about those topics. Another thing is to actively interrupt fat shaming. That is when other people say, well, it would be good for you to lose some weight, or why do you eat this type of food? It is so fat, it's unhealthy for you. That is fat shaming. And body discussions. Sometimes that happens when young girls and young women, they discuss that they're fat and they need to lose weight, and that happens at the group table when everyone eats. I think it's important to recognize that that those discussions are happening, than to say that we try to create a safer environment for everyone here, so it would be good not to discuss those type of issues or discuss bodies of each other. The last bit is related to body ability. Coming back from my experience of not being able to participate in sports because I was shy and afraid and insecure about that. So I would suggest not to force people to participate in sport or physical activities, but instead have some sort of an alternative to a physical activity, so people wouldn't feel excluded from the group and they would still have some sort of a way to meaningfully contribute to what is happening. And another bit is, again, go into this perception of what is healthy. Try not to encourage discussions on healthy lifestyle. As an example, jogging in the morning, obligatory everyday exercising, all of that could be an indicator of some sort of unbalanced relations happening with the body. So, for example, obligatory everyday exercising could be recognized as an indicator of an eating disorder or body image related issues, because sometimes people exercise not for the health, not for the sake of, feeling better, but for the sake of being thin. And then that develops into a compulsion to exercise and to exercise excessively. And it's important to recognize that though some of physical exercises could be good for yourself, it's also important to recognize different physical abilities to do some things. As an example, jogging, though it is extremely well spread, it has a very direct impact on your knees. And it is actually, a lot of people say that it is not that healthy. And especially if you have other body conditions or chronic body pains, jogging might not be the, the sport for you. However, if in the group, everyone promotes, or at least someone promotes that, as an example, I have been in the spaces where people say, well, I go to the gym at least 2 times per week. And if I don't go there, I just feel extremely bad and lazy. And I think it's important that everyone goes to the gym at least, a couple of times per week. First, that doesn't recognize that a lot of people coming from poverty do not have an opportunity to go to the gym. Secondly, it doesn't recognize that gym and exercising in the gym might not be the best solution for people with chronic back pains, chronic pains in the legs, issues with conjunctions in the body. So that is just not for everyone. Thirdly, it kind of creates this type of standard of what a good, healthy person does and what other lazy, unhealthy people do. And it just, goes into this very unbalanced power perception of who is good in the group and who is bad in the group. And that produces shame in the end of the day. And the last bit relates to representation. And those are easy things. First, just pay attention to what type of pictures, images you use, and try to find images where there are people with different body types. And I really encourage you to invite people with those different types of bodies into your community work. So if, for example, you host, if you host a workshop, if you host workshops through the, a calendar year, and all of your workshops are run by extremely thin, athletic people, you might have an issue going on there. Because then it might be the case that within your community, people who do not conform with the standard of the body, they do not feel comfortable to take the space or to lead the discussion or to lead an event. And it might be the case that they feel super shy to be in the spotlight because they feel that they might be shamed afterwards. Another thing, as I mentioned, try to openly communicate to the youth that social media are fake. Most of the content we see there is alterated and edited, and it's important for them to know that and to recognize that. And as a leader in the community, I at least try to set a realistic online presence and try to say that, a lot of the content is alterated, and then I at least try to post pictures of myself that are not edited to the extent of, me altering my body or me altering my appearance. It might be minor editing of light, of colors and all of that, but then I still try to be me. So then when people see me in the real life, they feel that, well, that is the same person who I follow in the social media. Yep. And that was mostly it, what I wanted to share with you from my practice. I want to, if there are any instant questions, comments or reactions to what I said, I would gladly take those, and I think someone would help me.
Thank you very much, Tony. Indeed, it's amazing how you put in very, very relatable, simple terms, the things that bother many of us as youth workers, as young people, or not very young people anymore, but still it's there, and it's kind of impossible anymore to close our eyes on these realities. So thank you very much for sharing, and for sharing also from very much personal perspective. Now I would like to ask Maria if we have anything in the chat that could be brought to Tony's attention now, and then if not, we will go to group discussions.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you very much, Tony, for the really great talk. Indeed, there are some comments in the chat box. There are a lot of stereotypical ways of understanding gender. I will not be reading those, but I can read the question, which is, why do we not value people for who they are, not for what is expected? That is one question.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. Then there are some comments. It is catch-22. Even if you're slim, you'll constantly hear comments as you should put on weight, or saying, now that you have lost weight, I want to confide in you, that you finally look the way that it's flattering. And then there is another comment, continuing a little bit the discussion, that social networks have distorted the perception of beauty by creating expectations and pressuring people behind the curtains of meeting certain measurements of standard of beauty. Alrighty. And then there is another question. It is a bit long, so I will try to read it slowly. At some extent, isn't it proven that we should move? Walking or checking what might work for each individual, because it can also be seen that children won't need to do sports and lead them to stay more in the laptop, for example. So not forcing going to the gym, but seeing what works. So overall, we had 2 questions and a few comments. So if you could maybe wrap up a little bit about your opinion, that would be great.
Right. So maybe I want to react to the question of why not value people for who they are and value them according to the standards. I think, well, my instant reaction to that would be that I think all of us, especially in the youth work, should try to create at least a community, if not the society, where we value people for who they are, and we set really flexible norms which allow people to self-express, express their opinions, express their values freely. However, unfortunately, we live in the society. However, unfortunately, especially when it comes to gender, I think there is, you know, a whole heritage of patriarchal system of what is supposed to be appropriate and adequate, and how people are weighted or valued against those type of standards. So my question, like my reply to why not do so, I think we should try to value people for who they are. However, in the process of doing so, we might need to combat and confront a lot of standards that that are related to human value and how we value humans. Hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think if this doesn't fully answer the question, we can still come back after the group discussions. And if you could just quickly also address the second question about movement and general use of movement, and aren't we in a way limiting or allowing young people just to sit at their laptops if we don't encourage movement? That was in a nutshell the second question.
Right, and on that I wanted to comment that I think it's just it looks like, I think typically it is portrayed as this is a very dichotomic choice for youngsters, either to be fully in the laptop or to do sports and go outdoors. I think, like, if we have a closer look at how young people are interacting with the world, we would see that there are a lot of ways for them to actually move in the world, and they do so. As an example, when Pokemon Go was extremely popular 2 years ago, all of teenagers would go outside to catch Pokemons, and they would, you know, go miles and miles to catch them. It just might be the case that first, our cities and our like physical urban environments, they're not appropriate for young people to move there. That is one thing. And that might be the reason why people feel unsafe to go in those environments. When I was a child, like I used to live in a region in Minsk, when there would be like a closed inner yard where we could spend a lot of times together, like doing sport activities, you know, hang out together and all of that. Now there is a parking lot there. So, you know, I think when it comes to urban spaces, like physically speaking, it's not that much space for young people to feel safe together and to do joint activities there. That's one thing. Secondly, I think it's important to recognize that different people have different approach to movement. And I don't think that just encouraging doing sports would give us a lot of, I don't know, community appreciation. I think there are communities when people are, really enjoy doing sports. As an example, I think when you go to like rural Belarus, like football, basketball are super popular sports, and people would easily engage in those type of activities. In Minsk, in more urban area, I don't really think that it would be manageable for me to gather youth with whom we work right now via a sport activity. So we try to find alternative ways for people to engage and to move. So we practice, for example, forum theater, experimental dance. We try to do yoga. We try to just suggest a lot of different activities people could do and from which they could choose from. And it's important not to force them to choose. So if I have and we have some people in our community who are not comfortable with, I don't know, with doing like physical type of participation, and that's fine. I think it's just, I think it's important for us to recognize that we might feel that this is the, I don't know, best way for children or for youngsters to be. But in the end of the day, it is also, we should allow them to choose whether they want to participate in those things or not.
Thank you very much, Tony. And thank you very much to everybody who was following us so far on Facebook. We will now stop streaming on Facebook because we are going to move to the second part of our ID talks, where our participants have an opportunity to discuss in smaller groups their opinions, their impressions of the talk, and come back to us, to the main room, and bring back their questions for Tony or insights or something that they found most catching, interesting, or maybe challenging that they heard during the talk. So my colleague Maria is going to invite you to the rooms in Zoom, and you will have 10 minutes then for connecting with each other and bringing back as a group one question, one comment, one insight from today's talk. Will be good to hear what you came with and what are some of the questions you have for Tony or some of the insights that you have. So you were in two rooms, and then I will invite one person from each room to bring in their question or comment or insight to Tony's attention. And then, Tony, we will ask you to address those in a one pack. Yeah. So room number one, if anybody please could just unmute yourselves and bring your question to the table.
Okay, hello. So we didn't actually come up with a question. We mostly talked about our own experiences. We kind of focused on mine because I'm the youngest one. I'm just 18 years old. So what we came, like our conclusion was kind of that in my experience, when I lost weight, I'm still not as skinny as a lot of girls, but I think I was overweight my whole childhood. And what I realized was how people treated me differently and better, and how people were nicer to me when I lost quite some weight. And I think also what happens in my case is how my body image sometimes I feel like was actually better when I was overweight rather than now, because I feel like the more weight I lost, I felt more insecure and I saw more insecurities. And when I looked at the mirror, when I looked at myself in the mirror, and I think when we discussed about food and how it's important to be sensible, I think that's the biggest problem, in my opinion, growing up. And I grew up in Balkan area, in the Balkans. So there, everyone's also always forcing you to eat those really, really like food with so many calories, like oily food and everything. And it's really hard to explain to people, like, I'm sorry, but I can't, I don't want to, like, it makes me feel sick if in case or somebody is, I don't know, like has problems with eating such things. So I think EDs are not really considered like a big deal in my country and this area. So I think what I wanted to say, I'm sorry for like making this a long story.
No, go ahead.
But it's kind of that what happened to me was when I lost some weight, I started going to from binge eating to like anorexia, not in normal anorexia, but a typical anorexia, where I really fear that if I were gonna eat some food, I will gain weight again and I will be treated badly, etc. So I think I'm like, out of all of the sessions that we had so far that I've been a part of, this one was the closest to my heart. So thank you, Tony, for telling us everything about yourself, your experience. So yeah, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adnan, especially for sharing your own story as well. I am sure it will be an inspiration and an interesting insight for other young people that will watch the recording afterwards as well. And now I would like to ask somebody from the second room to take the floor, and then we let Tony comment on the comments and answer the questions. Please, somebody from room 2. Anything interesting you discussed, if you would like to share it with us?
We didn't really create a question. We were trying to find the topic to discuss in the beginning, and we ended up speaking the examples about the food and social media, as we need it's hard to find a balance. We can't go on the opposites. And it was really interesting what Tony said. And that also people need safe places to discuss, but discussion, in my opinion, is important because especially if people are from other cultures, we don't know certain habits, and it has to be a balance between intruding or making someone uncomfortable. For example, at the table, yeah, it wouldn't make sense because then everyone is eating and speaking about food might be uncomfortable, but also it should be spoke about. That at least that's what I shared, because it will make people understand where the other person comes from, and it doesn't mean they need to change how they do, but it's also like if someone tells me about something that I don't know, maybe that will help me to be better. I don't know, now it's a bit confusing, but essentially someone can share a way they do something that I wouldn't think about, and I might think that actually that can work for me. And then we spoke about social media and about posting things or not, and how we feel about posting our pictures and if we do it or not. And it's also related, I said, about how we feel, because when I feel more confident on myself, I post more pictures. And many of my friends, and I guess a lot of people, they don't post stuff unless they look perfect, or they didn't post during quarantine because it wouldn't be interesting enough, or they don't look their best. So they have pimples, or they couldn't paint their hair. So it's kind of fake, but we also said that it's important because it's the new way to communicate. So I don't know if anyone wants to add something I might have forgotten.
And I was always from the room 2, like from room 2, and I was gonna add that you're always gonna be body shamed, no matter how you look like or what's your weight. If you're overweight, they're gonna like make it obvious. If you're skinny, they're again gonna say you're not meeting the standards. So there's no way out. You're never gonna make everyone happy, and it's important just to feel comfortable with yourself. And it's different things, sharing opinions, communicating, and like the previous speaker said, to see where someone comes from, like with that idea. And it's a different thing to have a discussion as a matter of judging. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Filipa. Thank you, Francesca, for sharing with us. Tony, now you have the floor. If you would like to add something, to comment on the comments that you heard, maybe this is raising some insights from your side to complement. Please, you have the floor now.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. It was very insightful to hear what type of discussions you had. I wanted to thank Adna specifically for the story and for your experience. I wanted to mention maybe that in my experience, when it comes to like losing weight, there is also a very direct social gratification in that process. When, for example, you lose weight, people start congratulating you on that or saying that you look much nicer at the moment. And though I think that is thought as a compliment, that, you know, you look nicer right now, you look more socially appealing. In the end of the day, it creates this system of, you know, reproduction of your own expectation to look either the same way or in some cases even thinner. So, you know, to still receive that type of social support, you either start even dieting even more, or you are always anxious to gain weight, because then people would treat you better or treat you worse. So yeah, so and I have a lot of issues with people, you know, congratulating on losing weight. So I don't really think that those comments have, you know, in the end of the day, that they are positive or they, I don't know, help you in creating more secure or safer body image. There was one thing that I wanted to pick up, and then on another topic, we have also discussed that in the smaller team on the necessity to have discussions with the group on the food or on eating habits. I think it's absolutely normal for people to want to learn more. Why, for example, people do what they do. I think for me personally, there are two issues that I always think about. First, whether the person is comfortable to share why they do this or that. And sometimes a lot of questions are very intruding. So people would ask, like, why don't you eat? Or why you eat this? Or why you eat that? Without asking before that, are you comfortable if I ask you a question related to your food habits? Or I would like to, to pose you a question. Could I do that? That would be in relation to food. And that would at least give a person a right to say yes or no. And if the person is comfortable, then I think that's totally fine to discuss that in a private setting, or even in the group setting, if the group is comfortable to do so. What I think is also important to know that some people are extremely uncomfortable to participate in discussions around food. I was such a person. Whenever there would be a group discussion related to food, I would feel really uncomfortable to participate in that. And I think that's okay, to leave an opportunity for people not to be in the room if the discussion is happening. So I think as a moderator or as a facilitator, it's like we should build the setting in the way that if people want to be there to discuss things, they have the opportunity. If they feel that this is something that is unsafe for them, uncomfortable, they just don't feel they are not easy with participating, that they could be doing something different instead. Because in many, I have been in several groups when people would say, like, well, we're going to discuss, for example, healthy lifestyles or like healthy eating. And then all of a sudden, it would be a whole speech on dieting, or, for example, how it's important to eat, 4 times a day, this amount of food, and count your calories. And I, for example, would come from a context of having like eating disorders for many, many years. I know perfectly well how to count calories, and that is an issue. Like I have done that for almost, most of my young years. I don't really want to hear about that. And I want to have a possibility to leave the room, not to hear about those practices, because they're damaging for me. And it's harmful for me to hear that is something that is encouraged. So I think it's important, though the discussions are extremely important, and I think we should host them with our groups and with our community members, because that is, the way how we build relations and how we build a deeper understanding of each other and all of the social processes. I think it's important to leave this opportunity for people not to participate if they don't feel confident enough to do so. Those were my 2 cents.
Thank you very, very much. And I think, yeah, we have a lot of, as a society, we have, I think, a lot of still ways to learn how to deal with sensitive topics, how to approach them. On one hand, not to neglect them and abandon them, but on the other hand, not to impose them. And thank you very much for underlining it, and also underlining the role of youth worker, facilitator, trainer as this kind of an example figure. And I really like that on one of your slides, you had be an example as a kind of very simple way how we can maybe mainstream healthier relationships of body image and food and everything. So thank you very much. At this moment, even though I didn't announce it in the beginning, we have something very special to share with you. Our colleague Olaja, she is our fantastic graphic recorder, has been working all day in the background. Being very sick, she still managed to join us today, and she is trying to now share the screen with us. Oh, this is so amazing. I have lost my talent of speaking at the moment. Yeah, just maybe to say on Olaja's behalf that this is something that we are going to also, well, not we, but Olaja is going to also redo, finalize after the talk, and it will be part of the article that we have asked Tony to produce after the talk, and the article as well as the final version of the graphic will be shared with you in the near future, within a couple of weeks by email. So yeah, thank you very much, Olaja, for your talent and for capturing all these important things about food and ability and the looks, and how social media is making it even more, more highlighted. Thank you very, very much. And for the rest of our audience, please, before leaving, if you could leave just one word of what are your impressions of today in the chat, we will be very grateful. And we hope to see you at the final episode of our ID Talks this autumn, the final episode of ID Embracing Diversity series in exactly 2 weeks from today. So please join us, register, share, and we will be very happy to see you here again. Thank you very much for coming, and hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.